I've got a coffee mug.
You have, well, I've got a, come on, we clink. We do a pretend clink. Cheers.
I love it. Cheers.
Yeah, cheers.
Cheers, Jane. And
Cheers.
congratulations on your award. But I must tell you, before we get started with what's currently happening, back when I was in middle school, you actually came to my school and gave a talk. It's Westridge School for Girls in Pasadena. And as a kid who grew up in Southern California, being really passionate about the environment, I don't think I ever quite got over it. It's a thing my parents and I still talk about quite frequently. And so it's really such an honor to be here with you today.
Well, it's great to meet you. And you know, it's absolutely extraordinary now, wherever I go in the world, but I'm not going anywhere right now except Zooming. But when I used to, there are children who say, oh, you came to my school, my prep school, my middle school, my senior school. They're everywhere, honestly. You know, all over China and Japan and Nepal and all over Europe and America and Canada. It's extraordinary how many schools I've been to.
Well, and I think about that, Jane, your work is so globally inspiring to people, humanitarians, scientists, those who care about the environment. But I am very curious, what was it all those years ago that made you commit in the way that you did to also showing up for children, to inspiring young people? Was that a specific intention of yours, or did you just get invited to so many schools that you started visiting a lot of them?
No, it was the other way around. You were right the first time. So, you know, at first I was buried in Gombe with the chimpanzees and came back occasionally, especially after my son was born. But then in 1986, everything changed, because for the first time we brought scientists studying chimps from different parts of Africa together. You know, at first it was just me, but then there were, by then, I think 6 other study sites. And we had a session on the environment and a session on some conditions in captivity, like the medical research labs. And those 2 sessions shocked me so much that while I went to the conference as a scientist, after 4 days, I left as an activist. And one of the things was to improve the lives of the people living around chimpanzee habitat, because they were so poor, so lacking in health and education, all the rest of it. And then after that, I met students who seemed to have lost hope. They said, you've compromised our future and there's nothing we can do about it. Well, we have stolen their future, your future too, you're young, but not too late. So that's when I started Roots and Shoots back in 1991. So it's 30 years old now, and it's changed the world. So, you know, that's it. I went to the schools because of Roots and Shoots.
Can you tell anyone who's watching along with us today who might not know what Roots and Shoots is? Can you give us a little overview of the program?
Oh, yes, of course I can. It started with 12 high school students in Tanzania from 8 different schools. And they were worried about different things in the world around them. They were worried about illegal dynamite fishing destroying the coral reefs. They were worried about poaching in the national parks, and why wasn't the government taking action? They were worried about street children with no homes. They were worried about mistreatment of stray dogs, in everything. So I told them to get their friends together. We had a meeting of about 30. And we decided to start a program, Roots and Shoots, with the main message: every single one of us makes an impact on the planet every single day, and we're able to choose what sort of impact we make. And we decided, because everything is interconnected, that each group would choose itself. So it's not a top-down, it's not telling people what to do, but they must choose a project to help people, project to help animals, a project to help the environment, or one big project that brings them all together. And we now have members in preschool, more in kindergarten, very strong in university and high school, and everything in between.
Mm. What has been the thing that's been most sort of amazing for you to observe in those groups of students? As you said, since 1991, it's 30 years. When you look at what that program has done from a sort of bird's eye view, what is it that brings you joy?
Well, I think the main thing is, one, somehow they acquire values going through the program without us giving them values. And the most important value really is respect for all life, for each other, and for the environment, and for animals. And so my mind went blank for a minute. I've just come off a conversation with a Swiss banking group.
It's probably a lot.
The hardest one I've ever had, because there was a gap between what I said and him hearing the answer. And it was his end, not mine. It was his home. And it was, anyway, sorry, to come back.
That's all right.
What was the question you asked?
I was just asking from that sort of, as people say, 30,000-foot bird's eye view, when you look at the 30 years of Roots and Shoots, what do you take away from it?
Well, what I take away is that I've had literally hundreds and the different 30 Jane Goodall institutes around the world, because Roots and Shoots is a JGI project. Letters from young people saying, Roots and Shoots has changed my life. And I don't know, one story is about where I wanted to know if this program would work in the inner city, because it started in Tanzania and then it went into some international schools. But would it work in the Bronx? Would it work in South Central? So we got groups together, got some schools to agree. And the thing I really remember was this young man. It was basically all black school, and he was called Travis. And I went and gave a lecture or talk to the school, talked about chimps, and ended up with Roots and Shoots, and went away and came back a year later because they invited me to come and see the result of my visit. Now, this young man was 12 at the time, and apparently I didn't notice him before, but apparently he was, most of them had older brothers and sisters who were in gangs. And he sat in the back of the class with a hood pulled right down over his face. He never spoke, and half the time he was plain truant. I go back and they say, we really want to show you what this Roots and Shoots program has done. And there were various presentations. The teachers had tears in their eyes. They said, I know you've seen more sophisticated presentations, but this is the first time these children have ever been inspired to make a presentation. So there were various groups telling what they'd done, but this young man stood up straight in front of me and he said, I'm in the group that wants to help animals. And I saw a Kellogg's cornflakes packet with a picture of a chimp, a drawing of a chimp dressed up and smiling. And he made this face. He said, I remembered you telling us that when they make that face, they're not smiling, they're afraid. And so I wrote to the Kellogg's. No, I wrote to you. And you said, yes, Travis, you're right. So he said, then I wrote to the Kellogg's people and told them that they shouldn't do that and that they were lying. And well, the amazing thing is, we had a little campaign going and Kellogg's did withdraw the package, but they wrote to him. They said, thank you, Mr. Travis, for bringing this to our attention. And can you imagine what that did to this kid? And that's just one example of many, many like that, changing lives.
Mhm. Well, and what I really hear when you tell me Travis's story, it's an example of so many, in my opinion anyway, communities around our country and really around the world that have had opportunities withheld. You know, we talk about opportunity deserts and food deserts and lack of access. And when someone such as yourself chooses to create pathways to access and pathways to inspiration, you have really, through JGI in particular, created a sort of open runway where science and communication and activism can all meet. You've created this really interesting intersection, and you've brought so many young people, and to your point, so many researchers and so many activists along that road with you. What was it like to create an institute? How did the Jane Goodall Institute that we know today, how did that come to be?
Well, the Jane Goodall Institute happened because at Gombe, you know, where the chimp research is still going on, by the way, it's in its 60th year.
Wow.
And there was a kidnapping from Congo over Lake Tanganyika, and 4 of my students were kidnapped. And as a result of that, funding for Gombe vanished. And, you know, it was like begging, going around with hat in hand saying, I'm not going to let this research at Gombe fail. I won't. And fortunately, some amazing people got together and said, all right, we'll start the Jane Goodall Institute. And right from the beginning, I said, the mission must be research, conservation, and education. And I was pushed back. You can't do all 3. I said, you have to do all 3 because it's all interrelated. We can't do the research if the animals aren't conserved and protected. We can't conserve and protect them unless we educate next generations to do better than we've done. So that's how it all began. And it was, you know, for me, I look back on my what's happened, and it's kind of like I was sort of guided from one step to the next step to the next step, and all I had to do was make the right decision at the right point to go that way or this way. And I think I made the right decisions. And that, I suppose, is why I got the Templeton Prize in a way, you know, because I've always, from my mother and my grandfather, who was a congregational minister, never seen any reason for a disconnect between science and religion. And when I say religion, you know, today religion is tarred with the brush of the extremists. And that's not like, I mean, if you go to the core root of all the major religions in the world, the golden rule is do to others as you would have them do to you. If they would just remember that, instead of flying off in these awful, awful tangents that lead to death and destruction and war.
It's true. I think about it a lot. I've got a friend who grew up in a very particular type of faith community, and I come from a very blended family where religion is concerned, which I really adored growing up because it inspired me not only to study the 2 practiced in my house, but many others. And to your point, they all essentially say the same thing. And the running joke with my friend and I is that everyone's wearing a sweater that's a different color and arguing about who's got the right sweater when we're ignoring that, in fact, they're all just sweaters. And I think if we could, to your point about the way that you observe even your foundation's work, if we could pull back to a bit of a bird's eye view and be inspired by the way, all of the ways in which communities around the world practice their specific belief systems in the ways that we all seem to love everybody's food, it would be so beneficial to us. And my greatest hope when I think about that possibility is that it would also enable us to see how sacred the world around us is. I think there's something a bit backwards that as these, you know, sentient humans, we think that the world exists for us rather than that we are guests in the world. And
Yeah.
I imagine that you see the true miracle of the planet and its ecosystems because of your work, and you've seen it for a very long time.
Indeed, I have. And, it's the only thing that really differentiates us from our closest relatives, the chimps and the other animals, is the explosive development of our intellect. And, animals are way, way, way more intelligent than science used to believe, way more. I mean, I'm sure you've seen my octopus teacher, have you?
It's so beautiful.
Yes, well, the octopus is very intelligent. And we know the chimps are, and they're really smart. They can use computers and things. But nothing can compare with a creature that can design a rocket that goes up to Mars, with a robot that creeps around on the surface of the red planet, where we used to think maybe life could be supported. And we don't want to go and live on Mars. It won't support our life without lots of boosting up. And so isn't it odd that the most intellectual creature is destroying its only home? And what I believe is it's because there's been a disconnection between the clever brain and the human heart. And I love the fact that poetically we've seated love and compassion in the heart, which after all is just an organ in the body pumping blood around. So how we ever started with the heart, I don't know.
It's true. It's really true. And I wonder why, because this isn't very far.
No.
This seems to be the longest 12 inches to connect.
Yes, yeah. And it's greed, greed. It was Mahatma Gandhi who said, this planet can provide for human need, but not human greed. And think of what's gone wrong, which is that in so many instances, the GDP increasing year by year is far more important and supersedes protecting the environment for the future. That's what's got to change.
And what interests me is that we don't seem, for as intellectual as we are, I often call it the lizard brain, which probably isn't quite correct, but I think about where our base instincts and fears come from, the tendency for humanity to get caught in that scarcity mentality that does create the type of greed you're talking about, the fear that somehow we're going to lose it all. And we can really lean into that. Yet the truth of the matter is that we can take better care of the planet and have better outcomes. If we want to increase the GDP, we could simply require gender parity in terms of pay. And if we did so, the GDP would increase by 12 points. And that's a statistic, by the way, from 2015. So I imagine it would be more than 12 points today. There are all of these things we could do to create better outcomes, both for the planet and the economy. And that's a thing I hope that we can really create awareness around in this moment and in this generation, that you can do well and do good simultaneously.
Yep. So moving to a clean, green economy, moving to renewable energy creates jobs.
Yes.
But there has to be a break in the cozy relationship between governments and some of these big businesses like oil and gas, like the agricultural lobby, which is so powerful and results in such cruelty. Somehow those ties have to be broken and corruption has to go away. But as we're all human beings, those things are very difficult. I mean, we're all human.
Well, it's hard for us as people to imagine something new. When we talk about mental health, researchers will say that the human brain would rather stay in the pain it knows than risk the unknown, even if the unknown is joy. And I think about that in terms of some of our addictive behaviors as a society and in our economy, which you referenced, our reliance on fossil fuels, et cetera. It seems as though in the lizard part of our brains, we all think, well, if we lose this, what will happen? and yet what could happen could be so much better for us. And I think about the researchers who've worked their whole lives to teach us these things and to show us these outcomes and to educate us about the wisdom of the natural world. And you are one of the leaders in that field. What is it that keeps you going?
Well, I'm in my 88th year. That means that for each year that I have no idea when the end will be, but each year that passes takes me closer to it, all of us. But when you get to 88, the end is somewhere kind of visible. Time is running out. And my message about, having hope and taking action, I think is so important that people say, aren't you slowing down at your age? And I say, no, I have to speed up because I've got so much more to do, so much more. And that's been the one bright spark of being grounded, as I call it, here at home. By the way, this is the house I grew up in.
Really?
Yes, I've been here. It's a family home now. I've been here since the start of the pandemic. It's the longest I've been here since I left school. And
Wow.
so, the bright side is that whereas I used to travel 300 days a year and go to schools like yours, I can now go to 10 times as many schools, even though it's virtually. I can reach millions more people, and I can reach them in many more countries. And that is working.
That's incredible. And I imagine it's quite a feeling, as you said, in your 88th year, to have just won the Templeton Prize. Can you tell us about that?
Well, of course, I was totally amazed. I was amazed because I looked at the roster of people who'd won it before, and I thought, oh, crikey, now it's just me. But the generosity of the prize means that we can do an awful lot for helping some of the developing countries in Roots and Shoots and even JGI. So I have to say I'm honored and grateful. And sometimes it's become the thing. I don't know if you've ever thought of this, but when you get awarded something, people tend to say, I'm humbled. And if you think about that, does that really make sense? Why would you be humbled? Why wouldn't you be grateful, happy, thrilled, excited? Yeah, I don't see that it's humbling. Do you? Do you think it's humbling?
It's a very interesting point you make, because I see where the tendency comes from. I felt my instinct was to say that I felt humbled, as we were talking about earlier, testifying before Congress last week, because it does, when you look at the list of who's come before you, you think, wow, what a moment. And I'm realizing as you're saying this that I think what is more specifically true about it is that it feels like such an honor.
Yeah, it's an
To
honor.
walk in the footsteps of the people who've come before you. I think it reminds you of how small we each are on the planet, but if we're dedicated for good, the impact that we might contribute to having. So I think you're right. We might need to sit with that idea, and perhaps be a little more specific in our language.
Because I think humble is wrong. But JGI and Roots and Shoots around the world are doing amazing things. That wouldn't happen if there weren't incredible people on the teams. I couldn't have done any of this on my own. Yes, the chimps were on my own, but that was different, and it was a different era, and we weren't talking about conservation. There wasn't really a need, at least not apparent like it is now. There was no obvious climate change. There was no obvious biodiversity loss, although it was happening and has been happening for hundreds of years. But things have changed in my lifetime dramatically.
Yeah.
Being here in the house I grew up, the number of bird species is about half. We used to have hedgehogs and they've gone. And insects, I mean, in the summer months, if you had the window open, well, your room is immediately filled with moths and bugs of all sorts. Now I get excited if one moth appears. I get excited if I'm bitten by a mosquito. And that's our pesticides and herbicides and covering good ground with cement.
Trying to figure out how we each do our part when we're up against the kinds of things you talk about, I think can be overwhelming for a lot of people. I know for me, as we talk about these terrible dependencies, watching the Gulf of Mexico literally be on fire. A fireball underwater is something that we didn't think was possible, and now we've seen it. We know how dangerous these dependencies are, but the problems are so big that I think many of us wonder, what can I do? Personally, I have bees now. I've got 2 giant beehives at home, and I've been planting all around my beehives, the kinds of plants that they love and the flowers that they love to pollinate. And I'm so enamored with them. And I sit outside and I watch them during the day. And that to me feels important. And I wonder, could it ever be enough? What are some recommendations you would make to people of changes they might be able to make, whether they are in their own habits, or if it includes, letter writing campaigns to Congress, or perhaps calling their elected officials? Where do you think we can all be the most useful?
Well, you've sort of answered a part of that question yourself. You're into bees and planting bee food, and that's making a difference. And so, the whole message, for Roots and Shoots, is you make a difference as an individual, but the key to it all is choosing something that you care passionately about, whether it's collecting litter, whether it's working in a group that's trying to find ways of taking all the plastic out of the ocean, whether it's a group that's keen on planting trees, restoring and protecting forests, whether it's a group that cares about the treatment of animals, whether it's a group that wants to end this cruel, horrible factory farming. Choose something you want to do. And if it was just you, it wouldn't make a difference, but it's not just you, because awareness has grown around the world. And there's always others who care about something that you care about. Like this, you're talking about bees. And one of our Roots and Shoots groups the other day, there was a little girl of 5, and she was explaining that her project was a beehive. And so the person interviewing her said, well, why do you care about bees? So she said, well, they're sweet and fuzzy, and if we don't look after them, we'll all die. This is just wonderful. Isn't that lovely?
It is. And that children in particular can understand the facts and understand their importance and not hide from them. Her
That's
frankness impresses me.
Yep. And when you take action, when you then see you've made a difference, so when you know that other people around the globe are also taking action, also making a difference, that gives you hope.
It really does.
Yeah.
I see so many incredible initiatives, like yours, when we speak about the ocean, the Urban Ocean Lab, that a friend of mine who's a marine biologist runs out of New York, the activism around not only a Green New Deal, but a Blue New Deal to prioritize our oceans. And as you said, the kind of good jobs that can come out of them that support people and don't harm the planet. So I feel hopeful, and the increase in speed and ecological devastation also frightens me. What is it that makes you lean more into the hope than the fear?
Well, like I say, it's the youth, it's our brains, and it's nature's resilience. And there's so many examples of that all the time.
Mm,
And if you put them together, then you realize, yes, there is hope, but there's a big but. We've got a window of time to make change. And as citizens, consumer pressure is having a big impact on big corporations sometimes. I mean, if you don't like the way they make their product, don't buy it. It's as simple as that. And of course, we have to alleviate poverty so that people have the luxury of making those choices.
mhm,
But, you know, that, along with nature's resilience, gives me hope. But, as I say, but, there's a window of time that we can start to heal the harm, a window of time that's closing. And we can slow down climate change, we can slow down biodiversity loss, but only if we all get together and act now. And that's why you asked earlier, you know, what keeps you going? The fact that people do listen to my voice, and they listen to other voices too, but I'm just me and they listen to mine. I know because they tell me. And so I have to go on for as long as I can.
mm, mm.
It's simple, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And I think that that truth can also at times cut through the noise. When I hear you talking about how we have to create change in the immediate and also alleviate poverty, I think about, even the incredible changes we're seeing here in the United States since we have a new administration. And I understand that this child tax credit that's happening will alleviate poverty, which will in turn allow more families to fight for the environment.
Yep.
I see what's happening in Brazil with, this terrible leader that they've got there who supported the burning of the Amazon, which is heartbreaking and globally devastating biodiversity loss. So it does feel like an important moment to remind people that everything, conservation in particular, is inherently political because it is the political will and the policy that will help us to, stop this runaway train. And my hope is that those issues can supersede any other because whatever you might, want to argue with, whether it's around the dinner table or at a town hall, uh, you can't argue if you don't have a planet to live on. So the planet should truly be our foundational meeting place where we decide to preserve it no matter what. And then we can fight about everything else.
You know, these different prongs of stopping climate change and the reasons for hope. Don't you find it shocking that in a really wealthy country like the US, like the UK, where I am, we have people living in so much poverty that the children don't get one meal a day unless they go to school. There were people in the UK who gave up their Christmas to keep the school open so that the children could have a meal on Christmas Day because of the poverty. And these are rich nations. And
Well, yes, to your point, someone said to me years ago in a conversation about how things function in our societies, especially being in countries that are, considered to be equitable in terms of policy and finance. They said, "Show me your budget and I'll show you what your priorities are." We've got the budget. We just need to reprioritize a bit. And the thing that makes me crazy, both in terms of taking care of each other, access to healthcare, access to food, very similarly to the issues with the environment, is that we know if we provide this kind of access, we know if we invest in these pillars, all of our society will get healthier. All of our society does get healthier. People have more money to spend on things. Everyone does better. It's less expensive to keep people healthy than it is to take care of them once they've gotten sick. I know you know all of this, but for anyone who's watching us at home who maybe hasn't heard this before, jump into the research with us because it is very illuminating. And you're right, Jane, if we prioritize the health of our communities and planet, everyone would be doing better. And we know it's true. We have the proof.
We have the proof, and we have scientific proof that if you green a city area, if you green a city area, the health of the people improves, nature comes in. Urban tree planting is so very important, and not quite as important as saving old growth forests, but very, very important for the communities living in those areas. You know, if you go to a big city and you drive through it, one end to the other, you know the affluent areas, there's nice wide streets, there's trees, there's parks. Then you come to a deprived area and it's all concrete. It's all concrete. There's no greenery. And it's been proven that if you green an area of high crime, it was done in Chicago, the crime level drops. And they had a study. They had 2 areas of high crime, and one they greened, and the crime level dropped. The other stayed the same. So of course they immediately greened the other one. But corporations, cities, they don't want to pay for trees to go into these areas. That's what we have to change.
Yeah, we have to look at what we believe is worthy of our investment. If you were to propose a couple of things that you would love to see invested in, just off the top of your head, what are maybe 3 things you'd like to see us, put some of our budgets and priorities towards?
Well, I'd like more budget to go to environmental education and get it into all the schools, done in the right way, so that children get hands-on experience. Because once you know something, you love it. And when you love it, you want to save it. So children back in touch with nature, because with our digital age, we're just moving away from nature, making a line, and people stupidly believing that we can live apart from the natural world, which in fact we're part of and we depend on. So that's one thing. Another thing would be moving towards a plant-based diet and stop subsidizing the factory farms for lots of reasons, not just because of the inherent cruelty. And every single cow and pig in an intensive farm has a personality, has feelings of fear, pain, terror. And so moving towards a plant-based diet, and you can get wonderful alternatives now. And there's a big new plan to develop stuff that actually is meat, but from stem cells. So you don't need to breed and kill any animals. So, that's something that's important. And well, I think the third thing is simply to think about your own environmental footprint and what you can do each day. So those 3 things I put as top priority.
Beautiful.
And by the way, what were you just lobbying about?
Overcoming vaccine hesitancy.
Oh, very good. I was asked by the head of NIH, Francis Collins, said, would you be prepared to video yourself getting a vaccination? Because I don't know if they ever did make the video to share, but I did do it. I got a nurse. She was a bit startled, but she said, oh, all right. So there's a lovely video of me having the needle stuck in. I didn't have any reaction, and I didn't even feel the needle. I've had both jabs. Have you?
Yes, I've been very fortunate to do that as well. I'm so lucky to live in California. We've had a great vaccine rollout here, and it was really an honor, in terms of the things we were discussing earlier, the intersection of both the privilege of living at a time where we have access to medicine like this, and the reality that you get vaccinated not only for yourself, but to protect your community. It, to me, is such an act of love. It is exactly that nature of faith, do to others what you wish to be done to you, love thy neighbor, all of it, all wrapped into one. So I feel very honored. I won't say humbled. I feel very honored to have been part of a testimony like that. It was very special.
And it's still shocking to see the difference between access of vaccination to the
Mhm.
very poor communities
Mhm.
and the wealthy
Mhm.
communities. That's,
Mhm.
it's everywhere, and it's all over the world too.
Mhm.
So we've
Yeah,
got a lot to overcome.
we have a lot to overcome, but as you said, I think that the groups that are doing the work on the ground in every community, I see groups doing outreach here in Los Angeles to overcome language barriers and access barriers, offering free rides and childcare, and and that kind of work, I think, is the best of us. The kind of
Yeah.
work that you do at JGI, the kind of work that these students are getting inspired to do thanks to Roots and Shoots. I think that when we show up for each other, we really can overcome anything. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart for being such an exemplar of that truth. You've been leading us for a long time, and we're very lucky to have you.
Well, it's not really due to me. It's just, I don't know. I just feel that I'm in this world with a role to play. And I do my best to try to play it. And I've had lots of luck along the way, lots of amazing people supporting me when things got rocky. And especially having such an amazing, supportive mother.
Mm.
That made all
Well,
the difference. Yeah.
thank you for the difference that you make in the world, Jane. It's been an honor to speak with you today.
But you're making a difference too.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I hope that we can meet in person
I would
at
love
some
that.
point. Wouldn't that be nice?
That would be great. And perhaps in the meantime, we'll meet back on a Zoom and have a cup of tea.
Maybe. Anyway, good luck with all your lobbying about. Put in a word for the wolves, get them back onto the endangered species list. Don't let the grizzlies be taken off the endangered species. This makes me sick, the what they call themselves, I can't remember, these people paid by the government to go around killing hundreds and hundreds of coyotes and bears and wolves with poison, with traps, with anything, poisoning cubs. And these are all, I mean, wolves, they're dogs. I mean, it's
Well,
horrible.
and they're crucial to our ecosystems. When
Yes,
we lose the wolves, entire ecosystems collapse.
yeah.
I'm incredibly grateful. Here in the U.S., Ted Turner's doing so much
Yes,
preservation work on his ranches
right.
and is lobbying to get wolves re-released into New Mexico. They've got wolves back in Montana. I'm really keeping my fingers crossed that we will get there sooner than later because we need them.
Yes, we need the wolves and we need people to stop killing them.
Yes.
Like,
Yes, indeed.
The Yellowstone is the most best example I've ever heard of, where reintroducing wolves brought the entire ecosystem back.
Yes.
It's a really amazing example. So it can be done. And this
fingers crossed.
rewilding movement, the rewilding movement that's going on right across Central Europe. I can't remember how many countries have agreed, and animals are being reintroduced that were there and keeping the ecosystem in order. Even UK. UK has brought back beavers. They're talking about reintroducing the lynx to deal with the deer problem, which otherwise is a very expensive culling program. But the lynx do it just and live their lives and do what lynx do, the Eurasian lynx. So there's so many, and driving the other day, I haven't left home very much, but I was driving to a little sound studio to do something for the BBC. And all along the side of the main road, the vergers are now allowed to grow wildflowers instead of being mown and mown and mown. And there were poppies and there were cornflowers. It was just beautiful. Butterflies and butterfly highways. So there's so much good going on. That's what we have to keep remembering around the world. So much more awareness, so many more groups fighting discrimination, gender inequality, wildlife, programs and so on. That's the hope.
That is the hope.
Yeah.
That's the hope.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you too.
What a lovely morning, Jane. You've just made my day.
Well, it's my evening now, so.
Thank you. I know when we said we were going to toast, I thought, well, it's evening where you are, but it's only 10 a.m. here, so I'll toast you with a coffee.
Yes.
Congratulations again.
Oh, thank you. And cheers. Good luck to you with your lobbying.
Cheers, my dear. Thank
Cheers.
you.